Okay. All right. Guys, thank you for coming to our program with Paula, Edgar, and myself, Stefanie Marrone, about how to effectively celebrate the Heritage Month and other commemorative events in your diversity strategy. So I'm Stefanie Marrone. We're going to talk about us in a second, and I'm here with Paula Edgar, and we're really happy to present this program with you guys.
Yes, hello everyone, and I will put stuff in the chat. I'll just I'll wait a couple minutes until we get into the flow of things. So the numbers are starting to tick up. So do you want to put up this?
Yeah, I'll put them up. And so you'll see in the chat, you'll see some links. There's some links to sign up for the Women Who Wow program, a link to link in with me on LinkedIn. And then we are doing a second version of this program in March. It's just a little different, like sort of like the next version of this. And so we hope that you guys will join us. Okay, so I'm just getting this to the slide. Okay, hang on, I'm just gonna share my screen. We are very tech savvy here. All right, so I go to the slideshow. Don't judge me by how many tabs I have open. Okay, Paula, can you see this?
I sure can.
Okay, awesome. Purple is Paula's favorite color, so that is why I chose purple for this template. So, so welcome, guys. And I think we're going to introduce ourselves. Okay, so Paula, will you introduce yourself, please?
I sure will. Hi, everyone. I am Paula Edgar. I am an attorney. I am a speaker and consultant, and I believe in presenting information through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I do lots of professional development around branding, around imposter syndrome, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, lots of the things that we consider soft skills, but when in fact they are actually ones that are differentiators in terms of what we do. And I also do diversity training and consulting. And so I look forward to connecting with you today and sharing our insights about this very, very important topic. Stefanie, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Paula. So I'm Stefanie Marrone, and I work with lots of different law firms and legal service providers on marketing strategies and social media strategies. And I'm an outsourced CMO now, and I've been doing this for about 2 years. Before that, I worked in-house as a marketer at many law firms. I started at Paul Weiss, and then I was at Sullivan and Cromwell, Morrison and Forster, Proskauer, Mayer Brown, and a few others here and there. And I was primarily in communications and content, social media. A lot of my job was working with recruiting and PR and the diversity groups and pro bono on lots of different strategies. I've definitely worked hand in hand with the diversity teams on the different kinds of diversity events, inclusion, all of those sorts of things. And one of the things that was really important was, how to market those kinds of initiatives. What was appropriate, what wasn't, what would we be doing, what would we not do? And this was many years ago, even before law firms even had, formal programs. I worked at some firms that were very advanced and other firms that were not, and were really trying. And so, it's always a tightrope to kind of find that right balance of things. And so I'm passionate about this in terms of, understanding that there is lack of representation and a lot these law firms really need to do, and how you do it. And so I see firms that are trying, I see firms that need to try more. And my job is to help them do it in a way that's authentic and a way that makes sense. And also sometimes to say nothing when it doesn't make sense. And I have 2 French bulldog puppies that act very poorly, especially when I'm presenting. So FYI, they may bark, they may do bad things, just ignore them. But you can follow them on Instagram if you like. I'll put their handle in the chat. Okay, so we're so happy you guys are here. And so I just wanted to bring this up. So it was funny though. So last week, I think I was saying before everybody joined, like, I think it was like 13 MLK Day posts. And Paula and I caught up last week, and I think it was the week before. And we were just catching up. And that was where this idea came from. Because I was saying, like, it's so hard for me sometimes to create these posts and do some of these initiatives when, like, I feel like some of my clients and some of the firms, and not just firms, like companies, don't really have a diversity initiative, or don't really, do a lot in that way, or don't have any Black employees. And some of it is honestly like the Great Resignation, and it's not for lack of trying. Like, they really want to have more people, but they can't. And others are just, it's just, they're doing it because they feel like they need to. And so we're going to talk about this, but I can't tell you how many Martin Luther King Jr. quotes I went through, and I was sort of feeling like, what like, it just felt disingenuous at some point for some of them. Some, it made sense. So Paula posted this, and we were talking about like what she should post, if she should post anything, because I said, I think you should tell people this. And I love what you did, Paula. And it actually, like, I don't know if you guys can see at the bottom, but it went viral. I think you got 6,000 likes on this, which is like the icing on the cake. And I'd love for you to share with us like how this post came to be. But you said, may the MLK quote you post today align with the words and actions you choose over the next 364 days, which I couldn't have said any better, which is exactly what Darryl Gray said. I don't know him, but this post came up in my feed, which is exactly the same sort of message. Don't share my quotes, live my words. So Paula, this is exactly what I was saying to you, and you sort of conveyed it perfectly. But do you want to tell us about this and why you posted it?
Yeah, so I decided that I was frustrated. I was frustrated because there was a lot of performative diversity, performative allyship around MLK, and that we can actually, I think, anticipate for Black History Month, and also Women's History Month, and all the other commemorations. And so when Stefanie and I were talking, more than a few weeks before about this, we talked about what's appropriate and what people should be doing for MLK Day. And really, especially this year, given what has happened in terms of voting rights and all the things that MLK actually stood for, it made sense to really think less about some of the quotes that are taken without context, and much more about what he actually stood for, what his actual scholarship and his advocacy was about. And if folks were going to be aligning with his words, that they should understand that that's just not a one-day thing, that is an all year round, rest of your life, I'm on a path to this thing. And so I think the reason why this quote resonated for so many, or this post resonated for so many, was because I'm not alone in thinking this. There's a lot of people who will say one thing and then do very different things every other day of the year. And so I'm glad it resonated. And I think that really is the tee off to what we were going to be talking about today. So I think if you would flip forward a couple slides.
Okay, yeah. And yes, and this was the program I was talking about. The link is in the chat. We're going to talk about successful inclusive marketing strategies. It goes far beyond what we're talking about today with commemorative events and talking about Heritage Month. We're going to talk about much more, including like accessibility and other things on social media and marketing and your website and other things, lots of other things. So join us March 9th, and the link is in the chat. Okay.
I just put the link back in. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
All right, so housekeeping. So the chat is yours to converse with each other, reflect, etc. But please do, you can keep going through all of the slides, all the things on this one. Please do use the Q&A for questions so that we can make sure we can find them instead of having to scroll through the chat for your questions. That's just a little housekeeping. Stefanie calls me mean mommy because I have very strict rules when it comes to Zoom. It's been 2 years now. We have to know what we do here. So please do use the chat for just sharing share where you are, what your thoughts are, but for questions, keep those in the actual Q&A section. All right, next up, please do, as some of you have already done, because I see that my phone is doing some things, please follow us on social media. We put both of our links both on the slide as well as in the chat. We live on social media. We love, love, love LinkedIn, and as my Twitter handles on my necklace, I love Twitter as well. Okay, let's go next to the first question.
Okay, so we were talking and we were talking about the MLK post, and like, we were talking about, another client of mine wanted to do a Black History Month campaign. And I said to Paula, they don't have any Black lawyers. So what should I tell them to do? I'm not comfortable doing this. And we said, we're trying to figure out the word. And Paula said, what's that word? What's that word? And your daughter was walking by the kitchen and your daughter said, it's performative. And so can you explain what performative diversity is for all of us who don't know?
Before I'm going to go backwards because I don't want folks to think I don't know what I'm talking about. So it was late in the day. I was having a break.
It was like 7 o'clock. Yeah.
My child is a sponge in terms of information, and she was able to flip this back and say, yes, mommy, it's performative diversity and performative allyship. And so essentially what this means is what it sounds like, right? When you're performing as opposed to being. A part of marketing, a part of the conundrum, I think, of being in a space where you're talking about showing your initiatives is that you do have to show it, right? We're going to talk about the reasons why, right? So part of why you show is because you want people to see you care, your commitment, your dedication, both internally as well as externally. However, the challenge is if you're saying, I care about Martin Luther King, I care about, Latin History Month, all of those things, and then you actually are not doing anything. You have no initiative. You have not done any work. There's no weight behind what you're doing, right? It's essentially just the billboard as opposed to the building. And the challenge there is that I would say folks have been able to get away with this for a while, right? They've been able to say, we care about Martin Luther King Day, we care about Black History Month, we care about, starting at the beginning of the calendar. But now, and especially in the past 2 years, there's been a want both externally and internally for there to be real weight behind initiatives, real weight behind things that folks say, and it not to be just saying it. You want to, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. Mm-hmm. So that's, don't just perform. A part of it is that you have to perform. And that's a challenge which we're going to talk about shortly as well, but be about it. Don't just talk about it.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. All right, and let's move on to the next one. All right.
So in thinking about this, and you can just go through it, I'm one of those people who likes to show every single bullet on every slide. The things we should be thinking about here is what are the challenges around this, right? We have this calendar, we have these expectations for commemorations. There's the challenge of thinking about what our impetus is for doing these things. Is it just for show? Is it just for internal show, et cetera? How do you do your best, your darndest to get it right? Knowing that, as Stefanie was talking about right at the beginning of this, is that because we're all on our journey on this, there's a potential that you might get it wrong, right? There's a chance that you might have a blind spot to something that you would, not really considered. And so when that happens, then what do you do? And then what are the recommendations to really incorporate this lens so that it's not just, okay, what's today? It's the 26th. I got to figure something out for February 1st, right? And then on the 28th, you have to figure something out for March 1st, but it really is something that is in your culture so that you're actually celebrating, you are honoring, commemorating, and a part of this is the way you market as opposed to it just being standalone.
Wait, do you want me to go to the next one? Okay.
So some of the challenges that you can probably imagine, right, are that, keep going, click, go, keep on clicking. Right, if you haven't done anything at all, right? So if you have done nothing, and then you're like, well, happy Black History Month. To Stefanie's point that she made before, there may be a couple challenges there, right? Where folks are going, well, let me go ahead and scroll through your website to really look through and see your commitment, and there's nothing there. Or there are something there, but there's some representation, but there have been no initiatives, right? So that people really know that this is just the kind of the talk as opposed to you doing stuff. Then the flip side of it is, like, I call it the Yelpism of work, right? It's the glassdoorness of your workplace, where folks are going to talk about the fact that if you're saying something and you're not actually treating the people who are internal to your organization as if they are valuable, if, to want to foster inclusion and belonging, then that's going to be a challenge if you're saying something that is not actually valid in terms of your values and the initiatives that you have approached. And then the last bullet here is what we were talking about before, which is that you're just performing, right? And those are some challenges that you should be thinking about as you're approaching, just trying to do better, do well, do good around this. So we're going to talk about some examples of getting it right, and then an example of when it has gone wrong, and to which we will not attribute any names, and when we go forward. So go ahead, Stefanie.
Okay. Yeah. And then, by the way, I was just going to say, like, everybody talks, right? So like your alumni definitely still look at your social, they still talk, and they follow you. And so like, if you're performing or what performative, which I actually think it is like a performance of some sort, and they know that you're actually not who you're portraying yourself to be, like, by the way, they do actually have like recourse, which is talking to other people, and also Glassdoor and all of those other things. So be really careful how you're portraying yourself out there on the interweb, because they can go and say, okay, now they're acting like they are the most inclusive environment, when in fact, they don't have any Black partners. They don't have any women partners. They are actually, not an environment that I would recommend anybody go to. So, you really want to, if you put yourself out there, you're setting yourself up for that kind of discourse. So think about that as well. Okay. All right. Getting it right.
Couple of options or examples of getting it right. So here we have some folks. The first one is an example of highlighting this person was a woman of color who for Women's History Month. The reason why I think this is great is because a lot of times you will only see, and we're talking a lot about the legal profession because that's where we do a lot of our work, but this is applicable across the board, is that you really will see the highlighting of Black employees around Black History Month. And that is absolutely okay, which we're going to talk about a question around that, but that's appropriate. However, there is a challenge where you see the sort of whitewashing of Women's History Month, where there's no talking about, and Tiffany's pointed in the chat, about the intersections that should be highlighted around Women's History Month. And so I love this because it's Women's History Month, and it's a person of color, et cetera. Then there's another example, and we were talking about this yesterday. I'm a big fan of organizations when they don't have it, meaning that they are, you're not sort of in best practice in terms of what you're doing, and it's starting to work, and you're seeing representation, and you're seeing, the benefit of the work that you put in. You can still educate, right? You can still say, this is the history of this day or this thing. You can still promote information and add a value, and also show that this is something that you're attributing value to without it being disingenuous. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about yesterday. So like we were saying, what about talking about history figures or art? And you said to me something interesting, which I think is worth mentioning again, Paula, about how it doesn't have to be figures from the past. You're making history right now. Can you say that for everybody so that they know, especially when you said when it comes to Black history?
So yeah, so I said something to Stefanie that my parents used to say to me, and that's why this is, so my parents would say that you are Black history, like you are making history. And so we often will look back, and Black history commemorations will be like, this painful thing happened, right? This really bad thing happened. And Black History Month, and we're specifically talking about that just because it's coming up, right? Is about celebrating the impact of Black people, particularly in this country, but I think generally. And that's why it doesn't always have to be this sort of terrible, like this bad thing happened. It is harmful to me. It causes trauma to me personally when it's, let's talk about this thing in slavery. When there's, again, there was obviously, when you're talking history, when you're talking education, there's a place and a space for that. But the want to only be in a place of sadness around something, I think it should be celebratory. It should be honoring. It should be value, like talking about values, as opposed to sadness. And so right now we have Black history, right? Like I'm in New York with Stefanie and I are both in New York. We have our AG is a Black woman. We have our first Black mayor. There's a lot of things to celebrate. And so that's where I feel that we should be, not just, not or, it's both of those things, and with some tempering around that, which we'll talk about shortly.
I love that. I think it's just, so I think you should look at your firms, companies, look for contemporary folks, look at your alumni, look at people who, don't just look backwards. Certainly, pay homage to the, yes, elder states, people, all that kind of stuff, figures from the past, but you are creating history right now. Younger folks, millennials, there are so many amazing people who are living right now. So
you're right. I apologize. I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right. That was a definite brain blip. David Dinkins was our first mayor here in New York City, and this is our second Black mayor. You're absolutely right.
But we have the first woman Black police commissioner, I think. So that's exciting also. So yeah. And you have, okay, so also, so I see like the Hispanic Heritage Month one looks interesting also. So that's like more about like just explaining the origin of the month and the background, right?
And it's a video that actually showed in the post. And what was great about this is that oftentimes, again, speaking about the legal profession, you will see the highlighting of attorneys. But this was really showing the sort of intersections of everybody who adds value within an organization. And so professional staff was highlighted here too, which is a great inclusive way of
okay, I can't stress that enough, especially now during this great resignation for like, I know we've got other people who aren't at law firms, but if you are trying to keep your people, your, first of all, staff, we hate that term staff. We like administrative professionals. We just call us by our titles. I was director of marketing. Include us too, when you're looking at you're looking for like Hispanic folks, Asian Pacific folks, whatever it is, we're people too. Women don't just law firms have this ability to have this case system of just putting only women lawyers are included in Women's History Month. No, I'm a woman too. Why don't I count, right? So think beyond just including the lawyers in your Heritage Month campaigns, please.
That's a whole nother webinar because
I know, Paula, and we're not going to change the flat law firm model today. If we could, it would be super cool, but anyway, okay.
Well, I talk about bias, and when people really think about bias, they think about race and gender, and I encourage people to think about the fact that bias also shows up when we're thinking about roles in organizations and what the value is, that we place there. All right, let's keep going. So getting it wrong.
This is okay. This is a very unfortunate example, and okay, because we all know what firm this is, and it's an amazing firm, and
we don't, but we're not going to say it.
I know,
we're just going to show the fact that when you don't think about how, and so this is not a commemoration of a Heritage Month, right? This is not, but it's an example of when the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion is not on what you're thinking about when it comes to marketing. And so this is a great thing. Yay, we have new partners, right? But we also have this new enlightenment around wanting to make sure that the profession and all professions across the board, right, are more inclusive and are more representative. And so when you have a post such as this one, in which there is a significant lack of diversity, both on race and on perceived race and gender, That's a problem. And so blacked out and not mentioning, because really it's not important who it is. What is important is that when you're thinking about this, you cannot only have silos in your marketing team. You have to have collaboration internally so that other people are seeing this, so that there can be some perspective, versus having to go back and do a mea culpa about something that, you know, didn't have to happen in this way. You could have celebrated it in a very different way and it wouldn't have made the highlight that it made. That was a low
This
light.
is, I just have to put a little asterisk. This is one of the most diverse and inclusive environments that's out there in this industry, and they got it so wrong, and I don't know what they were thinking, and it is just so absurd, and I'm just appalled by this. Everybody was when they saw this, and it is like goes down in the history books of just WTF, and I just never do this. Like, I just don't know why they thought this was a good idea. I mean, and also the placement, Paula, of the woman at the end as the last person. I'm sure she has like a last name with a W or a Z, but still, I mean, this is just, and this happened like, I think like 2-3 years ago. It's not even like this is, it's so bad. It's just appalling. So I think we should just move on from this, because there are no words. I can't. It makes me like so upset, because that is like one of the most progressive law firms I've ever worked at. Okay.
We agree on that.
Oh,
Okay. So some recommendations here. I think often the place where people get stuck, this is the same place that individuals get stuck when they say nothing because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. Yeah. Or they just say the wrong thing and then they're like, oops, I made the mistake, right? So my recommendation is to be authentic, and that will be refreshing. So for example, right, we are on our DEI journey, we're on our allyship journey, we are still learning, and in that we are honoring, right? Or rather than using a quote or something else, you can just say, we're commemorating insert month here, so that you are doing a couple things. And, you know, I'm never, as a DEI consultant, I'm not a big fan of check the box anything, but I'm thinking about checking the box for the who that you are doing something for. So when I think about what the questions are that you should be thinking in your mind is, why are you even doing this? Are you doing it because it's expected of you, or it has been requested of you? Are you doing this because internally you need to show that there's a commitment? Externally, your clients want to see it, or you're trying to, to make it that folks understand externally, who may be potential candidates who may come to your organization or your firm, that they see that even though you may not be there, you're still thinking about this. Those are all good reasons, right, to want to do this. The thing is, it can't just be, we have a good intent, and so we expect a good impact. That's just not how it works, right? The alignment has to happen when you are actually doing the work. So if I say nothing else today, if you are not started on a DEI journey within your organization, you are not late, you are far behind. And that far behind is going to trigger what Stefanie was just talking about with the Great Resignation, because people have choices now. You know, I call it the Great Revelation, because people internally have been like, oh, you know, I don't have to be in organizations that don't care about me. I don't have to be in places where I am not valued. And I use the word value a lot because it's really the core crux of inclusion and belonging. When you feel valued, you show up, you flower, you blossom. And that's the real space in which DEI hits its stride.
Yeah.
That's Stefanie.
Can I say, I just want to say something, like, and this is so much more than like changing your logo during Pride Month to the Pride flag, which I see as inauthentic diversity unless you are really doing things to support the LGBTQIA community. I don't know why that particular month is the one that a lot, even like LinkedIn does it. I see law firms do it. That's the one in particular. I don't know if it's the beautiful colors, but I don't know why organizations feel the need to change their logo when they don't walk the walk when it comes to actually supporting the LGBTQ community. Like, it just doesn't really make makes sense. And it's not enough to donate to charity. I think it's wonderful, or to volunteer. Like, I think that's great. And by the way, that is a great post externally and internally. You know, do a post that talks about the kinds of things that you do to support these, you know, groups, pro bono work, community service, those sorts of things. But it's not just like putting up a logo or putting up one post about the origin of a group. I love what Paula says about, as we continue on our journey, or as we learn, or as we educate, you know, ourselves, you know, it makes you a little vulnerable. It makes you a little more human. And I think that's really important. What I find so many organizations, especially law firms, do is like very me-centric, boastful content. And I don't like that. And the quotes are so overdone. So I think if we can get away from these quotes, we would all be in a much better place. I'm also, by the way, a huge fan of asking people what these holidays mean to them personally. And so like, and Paula, you could tell me what, I'd love to know what you think, but like just asking somebody like, you know, what does Women's History Month mean to you? What does Hispanic Heritage Month? I had the very best campaign I've ever done with a law firm about Hispanic Heritage Month, because a lot of the lawyers were talking about what it meant to them to become a lawyer, and they were usually the first generation lawyer in their families. And so they talked about the pride that they had to become a lawyer and supporting their families. And it was just such a wonderful campaign. So it was like that sort of thing. So, but you also can't use those people, like if like some people don't want to be asked to do this stuff. So like there's a lot that goes into it. Paula, I've just said a lot.
Yeah. So, click the next piece of the slide, because I want to talk about this while I make this point first before I answer your question. Anyone who has the perception that your DEI person, even your DEI consultant, you know, or your marketing person, whoever, thinking with the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion is the responsibility of everybody. Everybody. I can see your article, that you're looking at the article. It just changed from the slide, just so you know, Stefanie, we can see.
Yeah, I know. Because you put it in the chat. I want everyone to see this.
I didn't know what else you know. I feel nervous when people show their just. So anyway,
yeah, all of my tabs. I just want to tell everyone, Paula put this in the chat, and you guys should open this and click on it. But okay, so I'm going back to this.
Yeah. So okay. So I just want to say that it's important to recognize that it's everyone's responsibility. So don't outsource this, right? That is a part of it not being performative, that you are actually caring. It doesn't matter, you know, what your diversity identity is, right? And we all have one. We all have some aspect of diversity. Everyone should be thinking about this and talking about this. Now, so going back to I don't remember what the question was.
About getting your people involved in terms of the quotes and the telling their stories. Are you a fan of those or no?
Okay, so if you can drop the sharing for a moment, because I want to look at everybody while I tell them this. So I'm going to give you two examples. So one, I love the personification of anything in marketing. We are at our core, anthropologically, we should, despite what's happened in the past couple of years, be empathetic. And so when we connect with people, it makes us, it resonates more with us, whatever the content is. So I love seeing people talk about things. Now, I told you this, Stefanie, yesterday, but I didn't tell you it actually had happened. So I'm gonna give an example of something that happened without saying any names, because that's what I do. An organization called I do a lot of things that I refer to, if you look at my website, as DEI emergencies. This organization called me and said, "Oh, we have a problem." And I was like, "Okay, this is my favorite thing. What's going on?" So they wanted to do, you know, I'm not going to say what the month was. They wanted to commemorate a month. Actually, I will say a month. It was Black History Month. And they wanted to have folks talk about what it meant to them and who they wanted to highlight. Like, was there anybody in Black history or somebody Black, essentially, who was important to them? Because they, to the point that we always talk about, Stefanie, they didn't have a lot of representation. So they, in order to make content that was personified or personalized, they had to use a lot of the folks that they had internally who were white, who were just talking about Black history, which is fine. Yeah, we talked about that.
Right. We just talked about that, which is
Yes.
going to be one of the questions we talk about in a bit.
But
Yeah.
one person highlighted that his nanny was who he wanted to.
This is what you said. Okay. Wait. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yes. So this was the emergency. And so here's the thing. We live in a world where there is bias, racism, discrimination, stereotypes, all those things occur. What we will not do is to, especially in our marketing efforts, especially in our public marketing efforts, have the audacity to do something such as that, right? Like we know the history of, you can see I'm getting emotional about it because I was furious that this had even gotten as far as it had gotten in the space. And so to that end, it is a classic example of what not to do. Now, I did see something yesterday and I didn't have a chance to sort of clip this and show it to you, but this is what they did. They said, here's a quote. Everybody in the whole place had this quote and they talked about what it meant to them from their perspective. And what I loved about it was that you had people from every sort of span of the universe saying, this means this to me. And so it was authentic, it resonated, and it, the quote was from somebody Black. It was in anticipation of Black History Month. And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. Right? So you didn't have to say, this was my nanny. You didn't have to say, this bad thing happened to me. You didn't, right? It was just, this is what this means to me. So everyone was studying, focusing on the same content. Like it's kind of like a book club or an article, or when you do things that are action oriented. So there was, it wasn't performative, right? It was the actual, we're working together. We're thinking about this. We're having conversations. And that's what true diversity and inclusion is.
I love that idea too. I think that is great. I mean, I can't even believe that somebody approved that made it up that somebody didn't flag it and say, bad idea, guys. I mean, okay. Okay. And there are some really good questions in there. So we're going to get to the questions, guys. I promise. Okay. Should I go to the next slide?
You can go to yours because we already covered what I'm saying on the second slide, which is, so you can just flip through to your recommendation.
No, we didn't get to this stuff.
No, I did. I talked about doing it all year round. Oh wait, we didn't talk about the organization. So I will say that because somebody asked a question. Yeah. So this, we don't want to conflate diversity and inclusion with pro bono. I will repeat, you don't want to conflate diversity and inclusion with pro bono. There are overlaps, right? Because you can say we want to support an organization whose commitment is towards the Black community. You absolutely can do that. You don't want to say it's Black History Month, so we have to go help the Black people, right? Like you want to be very thoughtful about how you message this. You want it to hopefully be employee-led as opposed to leadership-led with the assumption that this is what the employees want. I can't say that's enough, that you should not be the only view, the only vetting space, whoever the you is for any initiative. That's why you have affinity groups. That's why you have, ERGs and BRGs, so that you can have folks to say, here's what we're thinking. What are your thoughts? Is there anything we're missing here? Is there anything we should add? Or let it come the other way. These are our recommendations that then can be vetted. Yeah. So that's it. I talked about the quoting, without context, it makes no sense.
Yeah, 100% agree. Okay. So you covered the first one. We already talked about art, culture, people. Okay, I just wanted to say this, which I think we've covered. Your internal audiences are just as important as your external audiences. So just remember, you should be doing stuff internally as well, not just for show. And there was something that somebody said in the chat about, not showing vulnerability externally, worrying what your clients would think. I don't think saying that, as we learn about diversity, or framing it that way and externally is going to raise any flags with your clients. In fact, I think that makes you look a little more human. I think most clients know diversity is tough even for them on the client side. So I don't think that they expect you to have it all figured out. So I think what they don't want to see is that you're putting people on the pitches. This is off topic. We'll talk about this next time. They're putting people on the pitches that aren't actually going to work there, that are just, for just so that you're showing that you have some diversity on the pitches. So, so one of the things with these holidays and in general, like if you're going to post something about Hanukkah, you need on social, you need to also make sure you have Kwanzaa and you have other holidays that are representative of all of the holidays. So actually, Paula has a list of all of the holidays on her website. So I was hoping you'd put a link to those. So you need to be inclusive. One, I know a lawyer who left a firm and she saw that like her firm, all of a sudden, the old firm started posting now Muslim holidays in addition to Jewish holidays on their social calendar. And she was like, oh, okay, now they do it. She always felt a little slighted about that. Paula, I see you nodding and smiling. Do you want to add anything?
No, I'm smiling and nodding in agreement that there are places where the omission is so loud, right?
Yeah.
Where you're really showing again where your priorities lie, and regardless of how you state what your intention is, what you do, right? The actions are speak much louder than your actual words.
100%. I also know like firms that will say, well, we don't practice law in Asia. Sorry. So we have no like Asian associates or Asian lawyers, but so we shouldn't do like anything for Chinese New Year. And I'm like, you have clients in Asia. Yes, you should. Like, so it's like the opposite. Like, yes, you should. So think about where your clients are also. And the inverse is also correct, right? Like, so you may not practice law or do anything or have any clients, or celebrate Chinese New Year, but you may have employees who do. And also think about, you may not have lawyers who do, but you have staff. I hate the word staff, remember, but think about everybody as a unified group. So I just want firms to just, and not just firms, companies, just to think about their people and all of the people and send out, if you send out an email for Christmas, you should be sending out an email internally for all the holidays then, or just don't do any of them. I don't know what the right answer is. Paula, do you think like a firm should be, or company should be sending out an email wishing people a Merry Christmas? I don't think they should be.
So here's the thing, the safest thing that you can do is Happy Holidays, right? It's the most inclusive thing that you can do, and it sort of shields you from being exclusive on anything. However, we have to be thoughtful of the fact that there are people who don't celebrate holidays. So to be truly inclusive, I think you have to think who are you, right? Who are you, and what is your value proposition, what your value statement is as an organization, and then be true to that. Right? You can't be all things to everybody. That's classic marketing 101, right? Who is your audience, both internally and externally, and then be present for them. But that's not to say our audience is white, so we're only going to do things, right? Like that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you're traditionally sort of a very sort of close to the chest, like very buttoned up, then you may not want to celebrate every single thing. Right? You may want to think for ourselves, and maybe you do a survey. I've seen lots of organizations do this to say that we want to think about how we're going to commemorate and ask your employees what they would like to do, so that you're being inclusive versus making a decision without their input.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more companies do holidays, like wishing their clients a happy Hanukkah or a happy Kwanzaa or a Merry Christmas, in addition to like the general happy holidays. So I thought, it was just worth a discussion of like what's appropriate or not. I think if you do some, you need to do all or do.
Well, yeah, I think that that's hard because there's a lot of holidays.
I know,
right? There are a lot of holidays. So I do think it's the kind of at the in-between point where you decide organizationally what you're going to do generally, and then if there's other things that you want to specifically because of, I don't know, like this is not a one size fit all. And I was saying to you yesterday, Stefanie, that it's not an equation. Right? It's not if then this then this. We are going to make mistakes. Like that's that's a part of being on an inclusion journey, is that you're not always going to get it right, but you do get really, really good at apologizing. Right? Because the intent and impact don't always align, that there are ways in which we can make mistakes, but you can't be afraid to make mistakes. You have to be afraid to not do things in best practice to try to get to something that is hopefully well thought out and well intentioned. And if you miss the mark, then to acknowledge that and own it. However, you still might. And so to the point of the folks who are talking about religious holidays, it is challenging because you are probably going to exclude somebody, right? In that if you don't say, I'm going to do everything. But there are some firms who will say, or not, it shouldn't just say firms, organizations who will say, organizationally, these are the ones that we have made the decision to celebrate, but we wish everyone happy holidays and happy new, etc. And that is a kind of a catch-all. That's not a right or wrong. It really, I think, is more about who you are organizationally than what's your culture.
It's a tough one. And, we were talking yesterday, there's 2 holidays I wanted to just quickly mention. So there's really nothing I wanted to mention on here. I just wanted to say, I want to talk about 2 holidays in 1 second, but let me just talk about 2 things and then I'm going to stop sharing. Link to organizations that know more than you do. So Paula and I talked about this yesterday. So you can absolutely link to resources of nonprofits and organizations, and drive traffic to their site. So Paula, you brought this up yesterday. I thought it was a great point. Do you want to expand on this? Like you said, you were saying this for certain, for some of these affinity groups and some of the months, any ideas about what people could do?
Sure. And are you going to stop sharing now? Or are you still going to go through something else?
I was just going to show one other thing here, just remember that, don't just focus on you, and then focus on, just make sure that you've got, other people who are actually diverse working on your team to be able to make sure that the things you're doing are actually making sense. I would hire somebody like Paula to help me, because if you've got everybody who's not diverse on your who's working on these initiatives, I don't know that it really makes sense. I just don't see how you could really get a perspective. So that was all I was going to say, and then just part 2. And I want to talk about 2 events. So yeah,
I didn't pay 70% endorsement, but I do think it makes sense in terms of just having that lens. And somebody asked that question, and I'll sort of get to that.
Even if you have somebody on your team internally, I think it makes sense to just make sure that you have lots of different perspectives. I just don't see how you could be a team of just everybody the same. It just doesn't make sense. I don't think we all are anyway.
So you just triggered one of my areas of diversity, which is I am neurodivergent and I have ADHD, and I cannot remember what the question was again.
Oh, sorry. Okay, it's the idea of linking to other resources.
Yes. Okay. So this is one of my this is one of my favorite things to do. So when people say to me, "Well, Paula, what should I say?" We need to pull a quote, and I'm like, you know what? The humility of knowing that you don't know everything is a best practice for leaders, individuals, and organizations. You don't have to know everything. You don't. And there are places and spaces. For example, last year when Juneteenth became a national holiday, people were like, Paula, what is Juneteenth? What should we do? How do we celebrate? And it's relax, calm down. There's Juneteenth.
This is the one I was going to ask you about.
There's a ton of organizations. One of my favorite places when it comes to Black history, Black culture, is the Smithsonian National History of African American History and Culture, National Museum of, and you know what I'm talking about. And somebody please link it for me. But it's also linked in the article that I shared as well. It's a great resource on lots of different things. There are tons of organizations that are educational that you can say, on our learning journey, we have all committed to, scrolling through this month, blah, 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 on this website. Why don't you do it with us? We'd love to know what you thought. What are you doing? You're showing humility, you're educating, and you're engaging. That's that's key in terms of marketing 101, 201, 301. And so, and it's real, as opposed to saying, this is a pet peeve. We honor and value the impact of Black insert a profession here. And then you go and look in the website and you go, well, how are you honoring the impact and value when there's no one represented? No one. Again, I'm not saying this is easy, because it's not. And especially now that we have the revolving door of the Great Revelation and Great Resignation and all of the different R words, it is harder. However, if you ensure that if you have one, you have the lonely only, or you have or 2, that they are well treated as they continue to do what you can to recruit and do better, that's fine. But you do not want to show those folks without their permission as tokens of the fact that you have achieved diversity, because you have not. They represent a portion of diversity. They are not all the things. And if they don't want to do it, they shouldn't have to.
Agree. We have a couple of questions, Paula, I want to get to. This is a good one from Erica Collins. She asks, how do you promote D&I and Black History Month when you are the only Black Hispanic person in the organization? Oh man, I would love to hear what you have to say on that one. That's not one of the questions I had on my list. But
burden that you should have to take. And I think that organizations get this really wrong when they hire people to be, an engineer, and then they're like, and you're also the head of DEI, and you're also the affinity group, because it's an additional, number one, task, right? It's that sort of office housework that you have to do even when we're virtual, that you're not compensated for, and that's additional trauma that you're putting on folks who are from underrepresented groups. And so if it is something that the employee, the lonely wants, and is catalyzing on their own, then yes, I think that should be something that is hopefully supported and encouraged. If it is not, it should be a conversation as to whether there is something that they may compromise, or there's something that they may want to do. If not, pull back and stop. That's why people hire me. You don't have to, right? That is not, you don't have to say, insert person who's here, tell us what to do. That's not their job. Unless you actually hired them for that to be their job, it's not. And people get this wrong all the time. What I love that law firms are doing right now, and other organizations, is they are starting to compensate folks for the time that they do spend, right? So diversity, equity, inclusion hours for their billable hours makes total sense, because then you're saying we value what you are doing and we're compensating you for it, as opposed to underrepresented groups have normally been not valued, not compensated, and that's why they're underrepresented. Right? You see how the structures of racism, sexism, and all the other isms fall into the organizations that we live in, without this view. It's a very privileged space to be able to say, why don't you go ahead and you figure this out? No, you're not paying me for that.
Yeah, that's great. So compensation also, working towards the billable hour then too. That's great. But yeah, I would say also there's consultants that do this. So the burden shouldn't be on you to do that. And even that's a lot to ask somebody to do. So I think this is a good question. We've had a hard time getting people in our company who are from diverse backgrounds to volunteer to be highlighted on social media or internally. I've had our DEI manager reach out to our race, ethnicity, and culture ERG to drum up ideas of what to talk about both internally and externally for these historical months for a few years. But often they don't want to voice their opinions or volunteer. Any ideas how to approach this?
Tons of them. You know what you're hearing when you hear silence or lack of engagement? You have to think about what's happening culturally. So your priority should not be in what we're going to do externally. It's why don't people feel comfortable enough to give feedback and to want to engage. It's saying something. And again, this is not outside of what I see for a lot of places, but you do want to hear what's not being said and address that. So I might think about doing an anonymous engagement survey, perhaps engaging someone for listening sessions. You need to get that feedback so that then you can actually correct and I shouldn't say correct, but to shift your culture so that you can then have folks who want to engage. When you have folks who feel valued and feel included and that they belong, you have the best marketing tool. People who say great things, and it's not because they have to, it's because they want to.
Yeah, I mean, wow, yes, I would say 100%. Okay, so how do you get, okay, so law firms have a lot of white men in them, and how can we use the white men in helping with some of these months? Can we use them to help with promotion of these, get them involved in some of these campaigns, or should we not?
So get involved in the campaign can mean a couple different things. So I think the key to shifting pretty much everything is by catalyzing white men to have an understanding of their privilege, and to be inclusive leaders. And that doesn't mean that they have to be on a poster for Black History Month talking about what it means to them, but it could, it just depends. But it does mean that them saying that this is important has a cascade in terms of organization, so that folks will actually start to respond and do, as opposed to there being silence and apathy or disengagement, or worse, resistance. And so, you know, I have the honor, and it's a challenging one, but it's an honor, as I do a lot of coaching of white male leaders. And a lot of our conversations are around, how do I show up in this space to make it that people feel comfortable, and so that I can lead and encourage others. If you don't have people of color, women, and, you know, LGBTQ folks at your organization, you have to have the folks who are there, and the white men, white women, whoever, whatever your demographic is, to say, this is something important to us. Because while you're still trying to get there, saying that it's important is a big deal. Because if I decide I'm going to be, you know, the one person who's going to sit in the front of the bus and make the stand, right? Then I want to make sure that the people who are there are ones who are allies, who are on their learning journey, ones who are going to support and encourage and sponsor me if I'm going to take the step to be one of the lonely onlys until you're doing better. So it does make sense for folks to be vocal that this is important, just to be doing that with an understanding of their privilege. So it's how, not the why. That of course you should say internally and externally, this is important, because it is. But if you haven't started on that journey, if you haven't gotten support around that, then you may want to wait and do the work yourself first, and then start to speak more about it.
Is there anything you would say to law firms that have like just gotten on that, like felt like pressure, like to do all of the things and show their support as a result of the summer of 2020 and the Mansfield rule and all of these things, and like you feel like, you know, there are a lot of firms that are now showing maybe they were doing the things, but they are doing them more, and they're doing it more externally, or feel more pressure from clients to do it or to show it more. What would you say to those firms? What would you say? What advice would you give them?
Welcome. My advice, I'm glad you're here. Listen, the murder of George Floyd was a collaboratively traumatic experience that we all experienced together. 9+ minutes of us witnessing a traumatic murder on video. That shifted so much for us, you know, as a world. And so when people say, well, you didn't do anything before that, okay, guess what? If we say, well, you didn't, as opposed to saying, well, here you are now, we have to start someplace. We have to be, you know, get on the journey. And that is a most terrible catalyst, but it indeed was a catalyst. The pandemic is also a catalyst, right? All of these things are saying you can no longer just be like, okay, this is fine. But we have to focus on inclusion. We have to think about people and our impact organizationally on all of those things. And so, yeah, you might not have been there before, but now that you are here, what are you going to do to make it better for the people internally and your organization, and to show that you are making efforts and that you are working to get better to the people who may be wanting to work there or who may want to hire you? Like, that's, you know, it's that piece of it that you have to think about all those prongs. The answer is, don't just do one of them, right? It's not just, I'm only doing this because I want to get clients. You're doing it because you understand it's better for everybody involved. And then you do it well. You do it with collaboration, you do it with education, you do it with humility and honesty and vulnerability, and checking your privilege, right? All of those things.
I mean, I think that's a really great place to just end today, because I couldn't have said it any better. And I would just say, it's okay to be vulnerable as an organization. It's okay to not have it all right. I would say one other thing is just don't go overboard. Like I had an organization say to me, we want to just, take over our social with Black History Month. And I said, well, you can't do that. Like it just is not authentic. And so don't it's okay to push back a little bit on organizations that you feel like where it just might not be good for their brand. And when in doubt, there are people like Paula who are out there who can guide your company. I didn't know that there were diversity emergencies, like you said, but that example you gave us is absolutely an emergency. I hope you guys will join us for a part 2 of this, and we put the link in the original first part of the chat, but I will share it, one more time right here. If you guys want to sign up, we will also put it in the, I'll also put it in the sign up, in the follow-up email that we'll send to everybody who attended and signed up for the program. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Obviously I learned so much. This is not, something that I know a ton about, but I know that I know I need to continue learning. So I want to thank Paula for being here, teaching me so much. And, we can only
tell a friend, send the video to your friend.
Yeah, we can continue to learn. And also, like, when in doubt, take a step back and just maybe don't do it. And just, but yes. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Paula. This was terrific. And come to part 2. So we'll cover like all the things about like accessibility, camel case, and lots of other things. So thank you guys. Take care. Thanks, Paula.